Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Faces in FinOps podcast, powered by ProsperOps. The Faces in FinOps podcast is about highlighting thought leaders in the cloud financial management space and their insights on how they're making an impact not only within their organization, but the broader FinOps community. Today's guest is Wade Piehl. He's a senior FinOps Success Manager at AWS. Now, Wade has been helping customers identify and implement cloud financial management opportunities over 6 years. With AWS customers facing experience, Wade has helped both commercial and public sector AWS customers to implement CFM best practices. Please join me in welcoming Wade to the show. Wade, thanks for joining me.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Wade, let's kick things off. How about you give the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, I've been at AWS for a little over 6 years now. I'm based in the Seattle area. I live in Renton, Washington, or if you're from the area, Renton, Washington, which is just south of the city. So lived here my entire life. And as you can probably tell, I'm pretty into the outdoors. And I, love the Pacific Northwest for that reason.
Well, I actually love the outdoors, but I know in Seattle, you've got a bunch of areas that you can explore.
Yeah, definitely a lot of areas to explore in the Cascade Mountain Range area. Lots of hiking, climbing, skiing. But what I also like is we have the ocean and the Puget Sound right on us too. So if you're more into the ocean area, it's just a little bit of a drive in, and you're right there too.
And some slight rain and cloudy days, right?
Yeah, well, we're entering our period of gray for 6 months. We get a little bit of rain, probably less rain than we're known for, but definitely a lot of just gray skies. So, part of being a native, I think I'm used to it. But Eastern Washington is a lot different. So I got to go over there every once in a while, just get some sunshine in the wintertime, even though there's probably like a foot of snow on the ground, but at least it'll be sunny.
So some vitamin D. So Wade, how
Yeah.
about you tell us about your company, the organization, and a little bit about your role?
Yeah, so I work for AWS and I do FinOps or Cloud Financial Management, however we want to call it. And had a few different roles here. I started out on our customer enablement team, and that was basically helping customers with billing and operations and doing a lot of RI transactions on behalf of customers. And then I moved over to start a cloud financial management team in our public sector business. I did that for 3.5 years. And then I had a little bit of a stay over on our cloud economics team. Our cloud economics team focused on cloud financial management, but also on business value and helping customers to understand total cost of ownership, things like that. So I did that for a year, what we called cloud financial management methodology. So it was doing a lot of standardization around cloud financial management delivery with our customers, but I really missed our customer interactions and working with our customers directly. So I've now moved over to what we call the Optics team, which is one of our many cloud financial management or FinOps teams within AWS. And I'm now that FinOps Success Manager role, which is a brand new role that we've created this year. Think of it kind of like a Customer Success Manager, CSM, but specifically dedicated to FinOps. So we're helping customers to develop a FinOps roadmap and implement that FinOps roadmap, measure the success, and focusing on kind of one of those top challenges with empowering people to take action on their FinOps opportunities. And so really excited to help scope what this role's like. And maybe in a few years, external customers, AWS customers will have a FinOps Success Manager. And it might be, an industry standard term at some point.
Wade, you've mentioned FinOps, CFM. Is there a difference between the two?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I was meeting with one of our partners earlier this year, and they asked me, why does AWS not like the term FinOps? And I just kind of laughed. I was like, yeah, that's not it at all. So, to help clear some of that up, so I was in a FinOps background before I got to AWS, financial operations. So I think that term, can be used really broadly. The way I think about FinOps is that it's a process within cloud financial management. And when I think about FinOps, I think about it's more about creating that culture of cloud financial management and spreading that culture throughout the organization. And it might encompass things like measurement and accountability, where we're understanding our cost and driving ownership back to development teams. And it might encompass things like forecasting and cost optimization. I think FinOps is a catch-all term for all of that. But to me, it also means that it's that people change, that people process change, that as we move to the cloud, we have to have our engineering and our finance teams work closer together. And that inherently is FinOps to me.
All right, I like the definition between FinOps and CFM, and that there's the overlap, or it's actually joined with it. Wade, before you joined AWS, which was like 6 years ago, what were you doing?
So I was working for Boeing, and I was working with our engineers in the supply chain and helping to understand with our finance people that are out procuring the products, procuring those airplane parts, what is that really going to cost? And if we had engineering changes, say we put a bigger engines on a plane, so we had to beef up some of the support structure around that, what does that look like? And so if we're making a part slightly bigger, but it comes out of the same stock size, so there's less machining time for the supplier to machine that part, the supplier might say, hey, this is a bigger part. It costs more money. And traditionally, Boeing might say, okay, yeah, fine, we'll do that. But when we worked with the engineering and finance teams together, we were able to understand, well, actually, this should be less machining time. So it actually should cost less. And then on the flip side of that, we might have an engineering change that was actually more costly. Like we might be switching out an aluminum piece for something carbon fiber because airplanes are all about weight savings. And the engineer was told, hey, save as much weight as you can. So that, okay, we'll switch to carbon fiber. But they didn't realize it was going to be 10x the cost. And so then we can have that back and forth conversation between engineering and finance to get to a practicality around weight savings and cost and like speed to market. So, very similar like financial operations where we're always evaluating those opportunities and bringing home the ones that make sense. But you might imagine engineering for a plane takes a lot longer than engineering the cloud. So we don't have that agility, that we do in the cloud. So I'm really excited when I'm at AWS to do some of those similar things, but we can make changes happen so much faster. Instead of years, we could do it in months.
Wait, it sounds like you were doing FinOps before FinOps was ever a term for Bowie, and working within other teams and collaborating to understand the total cost and the business-driven decisions behind changing parts or increasing parts or using different materials.
Yeah, definitely was doing FinOps. And then when I got, to AWS, we weren't even using that term yet, 6 years ago. And then it started being an emerging term. And I was like, hey, this is a familiar word, financial operations. And so even though being in a more finance role at Boeing, I always wanted to be more on the sales side, but selling airplanes is completely different. So I was happy that when I got to AWS, I could be more in a sales function. And all that work I had at Boeing had prepared me for my current role now. So it was actually a lot more relevant than I thought at the time.
Wait, let's talk about a little bit of your team. Like you're underneath the AWS Optics team, correct?
That's right.
And what are you guys doing, or what are you responsible for?
Yeah, so the Optics team is one of many cloud financial management or FinOps teams that we have. And so Optics is focused on some specific industry verticals, which is really nice because it allows us to be more deeply embedded with our customers and be more, not quite one-to-one. Well, some of our folks are one-to-one with customers, but have a lot more dedicated relationship. Some of the roles I've had previously when I was in public sector, for example, I was supporting worldwide public sector and I had hundreds, thousands of customers. So it's really hard to like drive change with that. With the Optics teams, we're really embedded with the AWS account team that's supporting our customers. We have like really good access to customer cost and usage data. And what we're doing is looking up and trying to identify cost optimization opportunities for our customers and then present those to the customers and help them implement. And then furthermore, help them celebrate those wins and spread that culture throughout the rest of their organization and, develop more of that FinOps practice for the customer.
No, wait, is that your day-to-day, or what does your day-to-day look like from a customer perspective?
Yeah, so I'm still onboarding a little bit, still finding out a little bit more about what that day-to-day looks like. But essentially, I have a group of customers that I'm supporting. And a lot of the day-to-day, week-to-week is looking at the customer's cost and usage data, having some proactive outreach with the customer, having some maybe dedicated cadences. We might be part of the customer's MBR process. And we're presenting those opportunities to customers. And then what's really cool about Optics is that we have actually solutions architects on our teams as well. So we might actually help the customer develop some, their cost intelligence dashboard and help them implement some of that stuff because we have some of those technical resources available on our teams, which is really awesome.
Are you working with the new Kudos dashboards at all?
Oh yeah, they were definitely working with the Kudos dashboards, and then we might help customers customize those. So I was on a meeting earlier today with the rest of the Optics team, and we were reading out some of the successes that we've had with some customers. And one of our team members is working with a customer, and they have a bunch of different dashboards within QuickSights, and they were working on an integration process of helping to make that more streamlined on the customer side, where they have all these different dashboards, and how do we get more aggregated views of that? And what is the best slice and dice for the customer so that they can, drive more ownership with their business units ultimately.
Now, Wade, can you help our audience understand what are the Kudos dashboards?
Yeah. So some folks probably are familiar with, say, like Cost Explorer, which is our like out of the box cost and usage analysis tool, which Cost Explorer is great for pretty much all customers. But if we need more ability to customize the views, say, in Cost Explorer, you don't have access to the payer account, but you have like 3 or 4 accounts that are underneath you, you might have to go into each of those accounts individually and view, the recommendations. So what's really cool about the cost intelligence dashboard and some of the other dashboards that we have in QuickSights is you can create more customized views that are more relevant to you. So if I'm like a product owner or business unit owner, I could create a view that's really specific to me and shows me everything that's under my plate so that I'm only looking at data that's relevant to me. And I have the ability to, create some customized views of that. And we even have dashboards like KPI unit metrics dashboards, which is one of the more end states of cloud financial management and FinOps is getting to that unit economics view. And so we have dashboards that are designed to look at some of the common KPIs and unit metrics for customers. So that kind of gets them started, but they can always add more, which is a nice feature of that versus like you can't customize Cost Explorer on your own.
No, you couldn't. So thank goodness for the Kudos dashboards. And I'm going to do something cheesy, and kudos to them. Sorry, I couldn't resist. I mean, I'm sure so many others have some good puns for it.
Absolutely. I think the name itself, they probably, we're trying to pass kudos on to the customers that were doing really well or like the team members that are doing well. So AWS naming conventions for different services and products, it's always pretty interesting.
I wonder how many don't make it. No, we won't answer that. So wait, let me ask you a little bit about, are you a one-to-one with customers or do you have one-to-many customers?
So, in the past, I've been more like really one to many, and now I have less than 10 customers that are directly under me. So I'm really excited about that to drive some more deeper relationships with those customers. And I think that's how you can really affect change. When I first started AWS, I was working with some of our accounts. I only had 4 customers underneath me, and I really liked that because I was on site with our customers a lot. I was part of their MBR, QBR processes, and really helping them to set up those FinOps functions. And so now I'm getting a little bit more back to my roots, where I get to be a little more dedicated to our customers, and I'm really excited about that.
Well, let's talk about your role as a senior FinOps Success Manager as it applies to your customers, working directly with your customers. Would you say that a majority of your customers or their organizations from a FinOps standpoint, their maturity is still in the early stages, in the middle stages, a variation of crawl, walk, run?
There's definitely a variation. And I would say within a customer themselves, between business units, there's definitely a variation between those crawl, walk, and run stages. And so that is, part of that FinOps Success Manager role is we're really trying to help implement that FinOps practice, identify a FinOps roadmap, and then help to drive towards that. Because we know one of the hardest things customers have to do is taking action, empowering people to take action. And I think especially in this economic climate, there's a lot of like cost pressure from leadership, but it might be like a one-time thing, cost pressure from leadership. Oh, we need to cut costs because of the economy's, uncertain. But what we really need customers to do is like long term constantly be evaluating opportunities to save, and then weighing that with, well, what's the level of effort to go get that, and then weighing that with all the other things that they might have on their technical roadmap. And so being more part of that process with customers is what that FinOps Success Manager is aiming to do. We have some tools that of the trade that we might use for that. So one of the things we have is a CFM capability assessment, Cloud Financial Management Capability Assessment. This is something that we haven't at AWS widely publicized, but we are getting ready to do so. We're going to have a session for it at reInvent coming up. But essentially, you probably heard of some similar things. The FinOps Foundation has their own assessment. Partners have their own assessment, but it's going through 44 different questions of CFM capabilities, and the customer would rank themselves 1 to 5. And then we have some benchmarks that we can share with the customer about other AWS customers, where they're at. And then we share prescriptive guidance with the customer on how they can improve. And then we use that to build a roadmap of what we want to do over the course of like the next year with them.
Sounds like a well-architected review.
Yeah, basically, exactly. Like a well-architected review specifically focused on FinOps. That's how I usually describe it to customers when they're wondering what it's like. I say it's pretty much like a well-architected review, and it's specifically focused on FinOps. We actually have some stuff cooking up with the well-architected team to maybe do some integrations with them in the near future with the capability assessment.
I thought I saw something socially that it might be integrated or working on integration with well-architected, or maybe I just read it as that. And I was talking with Yuri, and I was like, oh, this stuff is pretty cool. He'll be on a future podcast. But wait, let me talk a little bit more about how you're implementing FinOps within customers, right? Are you helping them drive that culture, implement from ground up to it, or are you helping them with I don't want to say established, but a semi-established one to help evaluate them and progress them along?
It's definitely a little bit of both, and within the industries that Optics supports, we're definitely supporting more of the mature customer, larger customer base. That was kind of the mission of the team, and so I would say as on average with under the Optics team that we are helping customers with a more mature FinOps approach. But what I am seeing as well there is that we might have pockets of FinOps success within certain customers. And so one of the things that is a FinOps best practice, but it's not always followed, is celebrating those successes and sharing the best practices. And I think that's where we really start to move from, like, say, a cost optimization type of function over to a FinOps function. It's when we're taking something that works really well for a customer, say, how do we use Spot at this specific customer? What is the best practice for implementing it? Because Spot's one of those things where people can be really hesitant to take advantage of it because of that risk of it being recalled from you. It can be kind of scary, right? For an engineer. Engineers are always used to developing stuff that's going to be there all the time for them. And so how do we take it for that specific customer of how it worked for them within a business unit and then share it out to those other business units? Customers are always asking us at AWS, show me another customer just like me who's doing FinOps, and how can I implement it like them? They want to see something really specific towards them. And the most specific we can get is within their own company, right? And so that's part of the processes of the FinOps Success Manager, is helping to celebrate and share those best practices.
I think one of the biggest challenges with benchmarking against yourself or trying to benchmark against other customers is that you don't have the data. And customers aren't going to readily share how they're doing benchmark wise within, publicly. They'll share it internally. So the only way, like you just mentioned, is I can share some of the success stories from within your own company on how well we're doing.
Right. And then, there are companies out there that are really good at publicizing as well. Like I would say Capital One is really good about that, and open sourcing some of their things like the cloud custodian. And so I really appreciate that when we have customers that are so willing to open up and, go speak at reInvent and share their stories, or, get on a podcast or maybe get on one of the community events that we might host and be willing to share. And so I think that's really important. This is very much an emerging field, and we're creating it every single day, right? And so I think it's really important for customers to be willing to share, because that's how we all get better at this.
Wait, would you be able to share some of the biggest challenges you might see your customers facing now, whether they're trying to implement FinOps or they already have FinOps, implemented within their company?
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges is there's always going to be way more opportunities than we could ever go and like action upon, right? And so I think how do you evaluate that opportunity and understand what the level of effort is to go capture that and then implement it, and then further on um, measure the results of that because. If we don't measure the results of the all the effort that these people are doing and then celebrate those successes, it's really hard to get like leadership buy-in to go do more FinOps work, right? Like once we've like cut the bill a little bit, and then there's less sponsorship from the executive team about going to do more, then it's really hard to like establish that true FinOps function. So that's definitely one of the challenges that we see. It's like let's take it from less of a one-time activity and move it towards more of an actual like mature practice. And then I think another one is adopting some of these newer technologies. So everyone can be have their own level of like hesitant to change, right? We're releasing new features and new technologies all the time at AWS. And so it's about going and adopting those new ones, like and testing them out and seeing what works for you. So whether that be like Graviton, or whether that be adopting serverless technology, or whether that be making sure we're on the latest and greatest instance type or volume type, like moving from GP2 to GP3, there's always something that we can be doing out there. And so the hesitancy for people to go capture those, it might be a result of like they don't have the buy-in. If I'm an engineer and all my management cares about is like making sure we're releasing new apps and making sure they're up and running, they don't care about cost, well, I'm not going to be caring about cost, right? Because like I don't get any support for that. And so I think it's about like creating that right like top down level support so that our engineers are empowered to go out there and make some changes. And we're probably gonna have to roll back some of those changes. They're not all gonna work the first time, right? So that's important about like let's make sure we do it in a development environment first, not in production, and test that out, make sure it works for us, and then we can go implement it more broadly once we have something that works.
And don't implement it on a Friday. Actually, that's very key that you started talking about that, is that all changes, whether you try to implement them, right, and they didn't work or they weren't successful and you had to roll them back, that's actually okay. That's okay for you to understand that these changes cannot be made with this environment. You tested in dev, it worked successfully, you went into production, you made a mistake. Okay, that's checked off, and you have to avoid that going forward. Have an executive buy-in. And the other thing that you mentioned is that this is not a one-off. This is not a one-off exercise. I've been involved in so many customers that they're like, "Oh, I just want you to do a cost savings, evaluation on my environment." But that's just a one-time thing. Here, go do right sizing. That's like the key thing. Or
Right.
S3, make sure you use all the capabilities, but make sure this is a continuous loop. And the FinOps actually talks about the three phases that you're continuously doing this. That's why you're in a crawl, walk, run. And then if you ever hit the run stage, you're eventually going to kick yourself back to maybe a walk stage, and
Right.
new stuff's going to come out and you might have to go into a crawl stage.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. At Amazon, we talk a lot about like one-way door decisions versus two-way door decisions. And so, like, just for everyone who doesn't know, one-way door decision be we walk through that door, we can't go back. Like we're going forward. This is, we have to make it work. Or a two-way door is like we can easily walk that back. And so, if it's a two-way door decision, we should have more like bias for action. Let's go try it and see if it works. And then also, as you mentioned, that continuous loop. So something that didn't work for us 2 years ago, a lot of people would say, oh, we tried that before, we don't want to do that. Like Spot could be an example of that. But architectures change, right? So a lot of customers are adopting more microservices now, and that's a perfect use case for Spot because they're inherently more like loosely coupled, fault tolerant, right? And so we were just going through an assessment with one of our customers, those capability assessments, and previously we had ranked them higher on their Spot utilization, but we went back and ranked them lower and actually reduced their maturity on Spot utilization because now their environment's changed. They're utilizing more microservices, and so we're pushing them to use more Spot.
Wait, can you help us understand what type of automation that your customers are using, whether it's for reporting capabilities or to handle some of these tasks like right sizing, evaluating, maybe going to Graviton or GP3? What are some of the automation that your customers might be using?
Yeah, well, I would say there's automation within Cost Explorer that like any customer has access to. So one of those things would be like budgets and alerts. And so let's like at a baseline level make sure we have a few of those set up. And so that way, like if our savings plan coverage or RI coverage starts to drop before below an acceptable level, we can be automatically alerted for that. Or like we can have some alerts that are set up based on expirations of those reservations. That way we don't forget. It's really easy to forget if we have some RIs expiring, especially in like our managed services like RES, where we want to maintain that coverage. If your RI expires and then 6 months later you realize it, well, we've been spending on demand for that 6 months, right? So definitely some baseline automation that we can have within Cost Explorer just in the console itself. And then there's moving towards like the Kudos dashboards, cloud intelligence dashboards that we talked about. I think that's another way to automate some of those like unit metrics reportings or other types of reportings. So that way we can quickly look at a dashboard and know, and even built in some, like notifications off of that. So we can know more detailed level of analysis on some of our cost and usage. And then if we want to go like step function further, there's partner tools out there. So many different partners in the AWS partner ecosystem that customers can take advantage of that are not only going to help automate like the monitoring reporting, but can actually help automate some of the implementation, like the right sizing, or automate like some of your purchase processes around reservations. So there's a lot of automation available, and customers can kind of pick and choose. And obviously, like as we go further down the line, like as we get into partners, you're going to pay for some of that, but you're going to be getting the value and offloading some of that operational burden. So it's about kind of picking and choosing the level of automation that we're looking for. And then, of course, customers can build their own automation, utilize things like Cloud Custodian or some of the open source things out there, and take advantage of more builder based automation.
Now, wait, we're talking about automation and things, but let's talk about AI. And I know it's the hottest term right now. Everybody wants to talk generative AI, but do you see AI impacting FinOps at all throughout the implementation, throughout the journey?
Absolutely. So pretty much every single executive briefings conference that I'm part of with the customer, they're always asking about AI. And I love to sit in on those conversations. I've been fortunate the last two EBCs that I've done. The session right before me was about AI, and I got to sit in and learn about that from some of the AWS experts that we have. I think it's definitely one of the hottest topics. And one of the ways that we might think about that is just a new technology, right? It's part of the ecosystem of the cloud, right? And it's a new technology. So if we went from like EC2 to then like containers, or we go to serverless technology, these are new technologies that are enabling us to do more with less, and be more agile. AI is going to just be like another step function improvement. It's like off the charts compared to some of these other technologies that we have, but it's really in its infancy, just kind of in a lot of ways like the cloud is in its infancy. And so how exactly it's going to be implemented at different customers is kind of yet to be seen. I think from a development perspective, some of the Gen AI tools that we have around helping engineers to code faster and make recommendations for them, like Amazon Code Whisperer, I think is an example of that. And now we've released it to where it can actually integrate with the customer's code base that they might have in some of those like machine learning templates that they might have already built on their side. And so I think that's a way in which we can create more like business value, and more agility on behalf of the customers. There's probably a lot more that's going to be done. Like we're already using machine learning to help customers forecast their cost and usage. That's probably just going to get better and better as we can make more and more inferences with trends. But one thing I will say is that FinOps, in the technology space, we love to throw technology at a problem. If you go tell a leader that you're going to go solve a problem with people, they're going to look at you like you have two heads, right? But I think FinOps is one of those spaces within technology that we cannot solve with technology alone. And we never will. So it's all about taking our finance and our engineering teams, putting them closer together. And AI can assist with that, but it's never going to be the whole solution. And so we probably won't want to lose sight of that. We're not going to solve everything with AI, but it's going to augment a lot of the things that we're doing in FinOps.
Wait, I agree with you. AI is just going to help things get better. We're still in the early stages of learning and understanding its capabilities. We're getting very creative on where we can implement it, and it's just going to assist us to go faster and do more things efficiently. I think we've got a lot in store for us and in the future for AI. Now, Wade, I'm going to pivot real quick and ask you our one final question before we get to some fun questions. This one's a real serious one. And the reason I say it's serious is because this is going to be some advice that you have learned throughout your career of working not only in FinOps, but in Bowie, is that what piece of advice would you give customers who are trying to start out in their FinOps journey?
Ooh, that's a good one. And I definitely work with a lot of customers that are just starting out. And one of the things that I'll say that I almost always do with these customers when I'm talking with them is overwhelm them. Maybe intentionally so to some degree, because I want to like wake them up to, hey, this is a function that we, should be developing as FinOps. But also like I try not to overwhelm them too much. And so I would say if you're just starting your FinOps journey, there's so much information out there, especially to when like I started 6 years ago. We didn't have like the tools in Cost Explorer that we do now. We didn't have these dashboards, all this stuff. So like, don't feel like you need to adopt all of it at once. Try to think about what can we do in the next 6 months, because I've seen a lot of customers get analysis paralysis, and we've showed them all of these things that they can do, and I go follow up with them 6 months later, and I'm saying, okay, what are we doing? And we're back at exactly where we were 6 months ago, and I think that's really easy to do when there's so much going on, so many competing priorities. And so it's all about what can we do in the next 6 months? Let's pick some things that are really actionable that we can go do. There's always low hanging fruit to go grab, especially when we're just getting started. So just go and try. And if you fail, that's okay, because you learn from those failures and then try again and, adapt from that. So don't get stuck in that analysis paralysis stage.
I think having the data, the analysis is very key when starting out in FinOps, is to understand your data, put it all together, make sure it's validated, trustworthy before you go ahead and try to move on to the operate and optimize phase, because you want to understand the low hanging fruit, all the other areas that you can do things, but don't jump on it right away. Go through it, understand it, and you don't have to be successful in month one. You just have to be moving forward, and you're not in the same spot.
You said make the data trustworthy. I think that's another thing too, is earn trust amongst your
Yep.
peers at your organization. And so like imagine if you're an engineer and a finance person walks up to you and is like, hey, I think we can right size this instance, and you're like, no way, dude, that's going to make my app run slower. Like, I'm not going to do that. So you got to make sure that we're like speaking the same language as earning trust. And when you make a few of those wins, internally, at your own organization, and you're building that trust amongst your peers, then it helps you go further with the next project. So yeah, definitely, like, let's make sure that the data that you bring forward, you understand it and it is trustworthy. So that way, when you go to bring it to someone else, you can get buy-in from them. I think generating buy-in is huge when it comes to FinOps.
I don't want to oversell it too much, but it's very key, because think about it. You're a financial guy, right? Okay. So Wade, you're going to play the part of the financial guy. I'm going to be the engineer. And you come to me and you tell me, hey, we need to right size this in this instance. It's costing us too much. Get a lower one. And I tell you, no, it's not going to work. That's not going to go anywhere, right? You're not going to trust me. We're not going to get anywhere. But if I told you, you know what, let me look into it, we might not be able to get to the instance that you're recommending because of the limitations and the licensing requirement, but we might be able to go down just a little bit because it needs to be efficient in the performance for that application. What did I just do? You trusted me that I am working with you. We are a team to it. And we're trying to accomplish the same thing. Now, next time you come to me and tell me we need to do this, and I say, no, it's not possible. All right, I'll put it on my list or whatever it is. It's a give and take, but it's the buy-in, it's the trusting of the information and doing it and working towards the same goals.
Yeah, I think it's definitely about like understanding the motivation. So as the finance person, I want to know like, okay, Jon, as an engineer, what are your motivations? What are you trying to do? And so how can I help you achieve your goals with that? And that's how you build that relationship and create trust. It's all about give and take. I have a little bit of a competitive advantage there. My dad was an engineer at Boeing. And so like, I always think about like, how am I going to talk to him? Like, or how would I talk to an engineer like I talk to my dad? Because growing up, he'd always be like, these finance people, they're always saying it's too expensive, And so like, I really got that perspective. And so I think I have kind of a unique perspective where I can talk both sides, engineering and finance. And I think, not everyone's going to have a dad that's an engineer, but think about what is an engineer's motivation? Like, what do they measure on? How can you help them achieve their goals? And then they're going to, kind of communicate to them, what are your goals? How can they help you achieve your goals and work together? I don't think anyone goes into their job as an engineer and thinks, I want to make the most expensive thing possible. They think, I want to make the, best application possible that's going to be the most resilient, and that I'm not going to be hearing from my manager about how it's down all the time. And so how can we help them achieve that in a way that's the most cost efficient, which doesn't mean the lowest cost. It means that it's the most cost effective, for the set of requirements that we have.
I like it. All right, Wade, let's change gears I know we got off topic a little bit, but it was a fun conversation. I wanted everybody to understand not only the FinOps culture, but the business data-driven decisions behind it. Let's have some fun questions. Wade, you going to reInvent?
Yeah, I am. I'm going to be at reInvent, and I'm speaking at reInvent this year as well. So COP 210 is my session ID. Just for a little shameless plug there, if you want to go,
I love that little plug.
Chat with me. It's going to be a chalk talk, so we really can get the opportunity to have a dialogue back and forth. If you want to come check it out, and we have a conversation. So it's going to be a purchase option strategy. So developing your purchase option strategy, and this one is actually requested based on our cloud operations leadership team from things that they've heard from customers in the past. A lot of customers have been going looking for a session like this, and so I'm happy to be delivering that. And we're going to talk about things like savings plans, reserved instances, spot usage, the correct usage of on demand in the right places, and be answering a lot of customer questions. Chalk talks are about, like, for those who don't know, like 15 minutes of a little presentation just as an overview, and then the rest of it's all dialogue with the customers. So really excited to be doing that. And then, as I mentioned, we have a session on the capability assessment. I don't have that session ID on the top of my head, but we're going to be actually doing a live demo with the capability assessment as an additional session. So we'll have one going over the capability assessment and one live demo where you actually we'll actually answer some questions real time with customers on their capabilities and kind of do, like, a shortened version of the capability assessment live there.
Out of all of reInvent, what are you looking forward to?
Ooh, good question. I think part of what I'm looking forward to the most is just sitting at our booth, our cloud financial management, our cloud ops booth, and, like, having customers walk up to me and be able to ask me any kind of question that they want about cloud financial management and FinOps, and just have that dialogue with them. I love meeting with our customers. That's one of my favorite parts about my job. That's why I moved over to the Optics team where I'm at right now versus my previous role that I had in cloud economics.
Wade, my last question for you is, if you didn't have to be here right now, and I'm talking at work because you want to be on this podcast, where would you be?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think it would have to be doing something with the outdoors, and I'm really passionate about animals. So, like, if I could have like an animal shelter, especially for like wild animals, maybe even like for like wild bears or something. Like, I know it sounds crazy, but like that would be an amazing job, super rewarding to me. I get to like look on Instagram and see some of these animal shelters and kind of like experience that way. But I would love to do something like that. And take care of animals. I think we have a lot to learn from animals, and it'd be a really rewarding experience. Being able to like re-release them to the wild, or just like use it as an education piece as well, so people could like learn more about how to respect the wildlife, because they were here just as long as we have been, if not longer, and so like they deserve to be here, and I want to protect their habitat.
So Wade, before we wrap things up, who are some of the most influential practitioners in FinOps today?
Yeah, good question, John. So I was taking a look at some of our previous Faces in FinOps podcasts, and I noticed a familiar face in there, which was really cool to see. It's truly the Faces in FinOps. It was Dieter from Roku, and so I actually worked with Dieter back when he was on the Intuit team, and I was actually supporting him from the AWS side. And so I was always really impressed with the Intuit team and what they were doing from a FinOps perspective. And I think Dieter, he was always like really good about driving action items. So every time I went to a meeting with him, I always had like way more stuff to do coming out of the meeting than I did going into the meeting. And so I think he was really someone that actually taught me a lot about FinOps. Like, we're not just on the AWS side teaching customers, it's kind of a two-way door there as well, where we're learning at the same time. So definitely learned a lot from Dieter. And it was cool to see him over on Roku. And, his face has definitely been around. I heard about someone in my previous role on the Roku side that was a really good FinOps practitioner. And then I was like, okay, it's got to be Dieter, right? So he's definitely a face out there. And then one other person I'd probably say is my manager on the optics team, or our senior leader on the optics team, Alex Head. She's been at AWS for probably just as long, if not longer than me. And you started the optics team, and it's someone that's been really influential at AWS, helping to lead a charge for CFM or FinOps.
Wade, I had the opportunity to interview Dieter. He was great. Awesome guest on there. I learned so much about him. Small world. And of course, Alex Head, who's been on my own personal podcast, an awesome person who's got a great team. I love talking with her. She's cool to have on the show. She's got an interesting perspective. You have two great influential practitioners in FinOps today. It's really nice.
I'm kind of blessed to be able to interact with both of them, and definitely learned a lot from them.
Well, Wade, thank you for joining us for the Faces in FinOps podcast.
Thanks for having me, John. It's been a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Everybody, Wade Piehl, who's a senior FinOps Success Manager at AWS. This has been another awesome episode and discussion around Faces in FinOps, powered by our good friends at ProsperOps. Be sure to hit that like, subscribe, and notify, and also check out the ProsperOps blog. Until next time.